Okay, are we on? Oh. Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Okay. I'm not sure. Do you want to, should I do some more? I'm sorry. It's probably because I moved it. It's just a little loose. It's probably me. It feels like it's not as centered as it could be, but as long as it's picking up the sound, it's good. Okay, all right. Okay, thanks, Sean. Okay, starting again. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the library this afternoon. I'm Shailene. I work in the Fiction and Humanities department here at the library, and I want to thank you all for joining. The library has many exciting events featuring writers coming up. And before we begin, I just want to single out a couple of them. We have a new writer in residence, poet Taylor Johnson, and he is facilitating a series of poetry writing workshops on one Saturday a month from October through May. And we do have some spaces left in those. So if you would like to register, you can find a flyer in the back of the room about that at the end, or see me. Taylor will also be reading and having a conversation with the poet Abdu Mongo Ali on Thursday, November 6th, here in the Poe Room. So please check out the flyers in the back at the end to find out about these and other enjoyable events. And if you're a poetry lover, you can join our poetry events email list by scanning the QR code in the back or by emailing poetry@prattlibrary.org. This afternoon's event is very special. I loved reading Dora Malech's and Jeannie Vanasco's new books, and I'm really excited to be featuring them together. Dora is going to read first, and then Jeannie will read, and then we will have some Q&A when you all can ask questions. So I'm going to begin by introducing Dora. Dora Malech's new book of poetry, Trying Times Trying, was published by Carnegie Mellon University Press in September. Previous books of poetry include Flourish, Stet, Say So, and Shore Ordered Ocean. Her poems appear in publications that include The New Yorker and Best American Poetry. She is a professor at Johns Hopkins University, where she is chair of the writing seminars and editor-in-chief of the Hopkins Review. Dora's new book, Trying Times Trying, is full of intricate details that flame with beauty. An example is the gem-like poem, Gwas. Gwas is what the child in this poem says for both grass and glass. When the child's mother tries to model more conventional ways of speaking, we feel the constraints of those standards. Language can so easily distort the world, causing damage, as when the mother models the R sound in Dora's gorgeously precise lines, quote, revving through gritted teeth to model R for her. I'm a gunned engine, wheels spinning into snow, close quote. But language can also suggest an illusion of forever loveliness, as when the mother says glass, I hold my L sound that, had we but breath enough, could go on forever, close quote. The child's way of speaking emerges as a compromise between grass and glass, between a language that damages and a language that dreams, quote, as if I could reconcile the fact that what shatters is what's growing as we speak. Trying Times Trying embodies that compromise, ruthlessly honest about our world and its dark erasures. It still cradles hope that loveliness may prevail. Poet Erica Meichner writes, there is a danger, a fire, a smolder beneath these poems and their dazzling beauty and music. Please help me to welcome Dora Malech.
Thank you so much, Shailene. That was such a beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad to be back at the Pratt Library and reading with Jeannie Vanasco, whose work I admire so much. I'll also say I read more often with poets than folks in other genres, and so I'm really excited to have a cross-genre reading today. in thinking about pairing this work with memoir, it started to make a lot of sense to me. This is very much out of a particular moment in time, out of my particular life, but also out of a kind of shared collective experience. Most of the poems were written between 2016 and 2022, and so you can imagine what was on my mind and during all of our minds during that time. I think I was nervous that these poems would feel like the ancient past by the time the book was published, and now I'm nervous that they don't. So here we are. I'll read some poems from Trying Times Trying, and then hear from Jeannie, and then have some conversation from you as well, I hope. The book starts with two very short poems, and I worry a little bit about reading short poems out loud because they're short and they go by quickly, but they do maybe set the scene a little bit. The first one is called Dream Recurring. All eyes turn doorward toward me. This is history. Where are you supposed to be? So that's the first little haiku. And the second is actually called Attempted Haiku. And it starts with an epigraph from the New York Times on January 17th, 2021. The epigraph is, "The nation is holding its breath." Attempted haiku. Breath, yes, but what else can we hold? Water, space for, accountable, fire. Reflexive. The teacher told me my heart was roughly the size of my fist, and I saw my hand clench around the new knowledge as if with an infant instinct again. Simian vestige, palm and fingers gripping phantom fur mid-air between two trees. It's natural the visible endure as measure of the hidden, but to this day it sways in me not only sense of scale, but purpose. For what is the heart, if not called from the start, to close over, to cling to hang on, to hold itself to this day, 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 this day. I'll read a mother poem. Confessional. It seems the first use of the term in our aesthetic sense was in Rosenthal's review of Lowell's Life Studies, in which he described the book as, quote, a series of personal confidences, rather shameful, that one is honor-bound not to reveal, end quote. That was in 1959. My mother was 8 years old, and for her, the word was still physical, a place into which she didn't want to go. If her story holds, it seems that she was born prelapsed, quite the opposite of prelapsarian, a knock-kneed natural heretic, pint-size apostate disguised in pleated plaid. The nuns instructed her to pray for the martyred saints, and she prayed to never be a martyred saint, which I take as an early sign of her capacity for pleasure, a nature she nurtured through adult authorities' cruelty and neglect, carried across the ocean into her own grown self to pass that nature and that nurture on to me. A poem's the only shadowed box I've ever entered to tell my truths to a stranger. I tell my mother plenty, but not everything. The same goes for what I'll tell the poem. Some secrets are rendered speechless. "Don't minimize your evil," she says, the priest would say to her through the dark screen. It's a safe space, right? I'm reading this right after the poem from my mother, and this is, I don't think I'm too old to say, oh no, my mom's gonna read this. It's from many years ago. Living situation. My roommate would return home late from Bible study group at Denny's, smelling of syrup, saying, "Prayer's what matters most right now." The first time I tried ecstasy, it didn't kick in until hours after I'd swallowed the pill, danced sober with strangers, and, disappointed, returned at dawn, only to double over and vomit on the steps at the entryway. I wiped my mouth and went upstairs and crawled beneath the sheet with pupils dilated despite the sunrise, rubbing the rough, miraculous nubs of the stucco wall with my fingertips and turning to gaze at Tina sleeping, washed in goodwill toward her and imagining what her faith might feel like a flickering pilot light inside her body, or like the low-tide certain lap of wavelets in a day-warmed bay. All that early morning, I thought I knew it must have some relationship with heat or light. Later, a huge fish swam to the surface of the rag rug between our beds, terrifying and benevolent. The whole next week, whenever my face could find a moment alone, it started crying. The news. And this is a little square prose poem that looks like a television. To me, it looks like a television. Now's news begins with babies on the way. Just one's inside me, but another's ascending to the throne our nation prides itself on not having. Though among our American ways and means is, if you build it, etc. And this one claims he knows from building. The New Year's too, a baby of a kind, since ancient Greek at least, then Jesusized in Germany, secularized to any baby, and captured as such by the Saturday Evening Post and past decades of animated cells, so the sashed, top-hatted, and diaper-clad remains today what last year Lisa Rose of CNN called an avatar of optimism, his enduring appeal, the embodiment of hope that the next 12 months will be better than the last. Now that I'm growing one from scratch, I fear I feel the metaphor extend. The headlines bearing now familiar nausea, cramps, fatigue, and shooting pains at sudden movements, as if the coming years aren't stork-dropped bundles, but bloody bulks that won't pass through without a fight. A gray day, and I can see my lamplit face reflected in the window at noon. The top stories swim through me, and I dive deep to breathe below the fold, ashamed at my gratitude for the teeming triviality. The story of Weihnachtsgurk. Thieves with discriminating taste steal sable furs from New York shop. For a moment, all the babies sleep, and I forget responsibility inside and out of me. It's Christmas morning again, and my only urgency is searching for that porcelain half-sour hidden in the evergreen. And then, I'm running past the broken glass, cheek pressed to the hall of pelts, arms weighted with the precious dead. History. I felt I carried something in me and cared for it accordingly, with vitamins and pride. I won't say what I named it, but I named it out loud. Then, no heartbeat. Whatever it was wasn't, and never was. Don't look at me with pity. You know you've known its name and how it feels to hold inside you and believe it to be good and growing, only to learn that it was nothing all along. Nothing, but much bloodier. Elegy. I want to start, the story goes, but then the story stops. I want to say you borrowed Chekhov's gun, but it was just American, a dumb colt bucking in your hand, neither of you old enough to know better, both ready to run. Speed is ignorant of direction, says the physics text. The part I love about the story that I hate is when it seems you still believe in what comes next, just not for you, is when, after you drink a beer and before you, as they say, do yourself in, meaning out of this world worth saving, you pause to place the can in the recycling bin. From the dance. Remember the boy who swallowed the pin from someone's corsage and came back to the prom later that night with the X-ray to prove it? His name faded out like the end of a radio hit, but his hospital wristband's dazzling grin in the black light remains. Whatever song I play, he keeps writhing, shirt sweat wet and face shining, like something sharp is still inside him, inside me. This is a Baltimore poem, as many of these in here are. It's called All the Stops, and it references my favorite sign, which probably many of you have on bumper stickers and on your laptop now, which is the one at University Parkway that says, "This is your signal." Have you seen this? Because so many people, miss which light is their light. So when you hear "this is your signal," we're all living in this city together. All the stops. Rolling through the intersection, I see in my rear view the back of the familiar octagon rusted over, belying the option of following its forward-facing order. The driver behind me brakes just as half-heartedly, and for a moment I pretend we'd make one whole heart's best effort to postpone the hurt and hurtle past the red fur of thorn and bud beyond the shoulders as the season nips the next one's heels. If you can't see my mirrors, I can't see you, warns the sticker affixed to the glint of the bumper ahead. But I've only got eyes for the peripheral blood smear shimmer where whatever winter took is finally kicking in. All those years wishing I were sure and thin as a sign and could wait for no mandible, nor manager, nor manna, nor mention. All those years I told my charges to hold my hand and look both ways as I told myself to stop at nothing. Don't let go. Let go. Everywhere, the reference of other people's safe words. Dive bars dropping paint flakes and first flowers face down with the sun on their napes. A tinge of desperation in every command. Take it from me. Ahead, a sky scored by some flight's velocity, contrail kindred in its substance, water, pressure. Two lights at a complicated crossing and the capital's cry, "This is your signal." Sure, but there are other shapes in me, flipped evergreen like rare old color film, and just as quick to burn. Some poets do more research than others, and my work is not always research heavy, but I don't like to be just plain wrong. And I had to do a fair bit of research to figure out, would the time when film burned be the same time that there was color film? You know what I mean? Because, film used to go up. And the answer is yes, but it would have been a very short window. So I thought, okay, good enough. I said rare, can't sue me. I think I will read just one or two more poems. You know what? I think I will end with two love poems, because why not? I realized in this reading I sort of foregrounded the beginning of the book, which is like one kind of dark, and I guess the second half is more another kind of dark. But somewhere in there, there's some love poems and some levity, I promise. So I'll read these two to end us on a slightly more positive note. And thank you again for being here on a Saturday afternoon. The first is called New Recipe. If you're really asking what I want for dinner, dear, a carrot or a stick of butter doesn't matter to this batter, none. The dough's in what you do, not herb, but verb. Imperatives, essentials, oil the pan, and so forgo the grocery list and stay, puree, a while. The only ingredients that can't be swapped for applesauce or air are the stir inherent in your wrist and, of course, to taste, your tongue. And the last poem is called Torah Study, and this is another one with an epigraph from the New York Times, this from March 9th, 2020. And the epigraph is, at more than one synagogue, congregants received an email this week asking them to no longer kiss the Torah scroll in reverence. Sweet skeptic, non-believer, for whom I never wrote a vow, not wanting to fuss and press at the us of us, not wanting to conscript and constrict into some narrow stripe of service. Years into this, I've found the words and want to recommit as such. I don't believe that it's too much to ask. Here goes. My atheist, may I die some distant day, your holy book, your sacred text, ancient, full of poetry, and often kissed. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dora. That was really lovely reading. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Jeannie Vanasco. Jeannie Vanasco is the author of Things We Didn't Talk About When I Was a Girl, which was named a New York Times Editor's Choice and a Best Book of 2019 by Time, Esquire, Kirkus, among others. She's also the author of The Glass Eye, which poets and writers called one of the 5 best literary nonfiction debuts of 2017. Her new book, A Silent Treatment, was published by Tin House in September. She lives in Baltimore and is an associate professor of English at Towson University. Heartbreaking, funny, and compulsively readable, A Silent Treatment is the memoir of a daughter writing both, quote, for and about, close quote, her mother, who for long periods refuses to speak to her. It's the for and about I find daunting, the author muses, wanting both to tell the truth and to show love for her mother. The memoir achieves both these goals brilliantly on every page. Its vividly absorbing present tense lays bare the author's emotional investment in her narrative. As she puts it, I feel committed to the present because presently I feel tense. Expanding to include the voices of others besides the author, friends, experts, the mother, a Google Home Mini, the memoir vibrates with interest and authenticity. Even silence speaks in this story, blocks of text reaching across space as we imagine what is unsaid. In the end, the book is a beautiful creation that is also a beautiful act of empathy. Author Raphael Fromkin says A Silent Treatment, quote, tells a powerful story of the gulfs that separate people and the love that bridges them. Please help me to welcome Jeannie Vanasco.
Thank you all so much for being here. That was such a lovely introduction. It's not often you get an introduction where it's also, there's someone paying a close attention to craft. So just thank you. That was like the most beautiful. speechless. Maybe it seems appropriate. Speechless with gratitude. So thank you. And I'm so honored to read alongside Dora, whose poetry I admire so, so, so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read first from the very beginning, the opening chapter. So I don't really think there's much preambling I need to do for it, except just a note on a formal technique I use that's not really, it's visible on the page. It's not going to be, it's going to be less obvious when you hear it. When you hear me say or read mom and then a piece of dialogue, that appears in a parenthetical. And I use those moments to interrupt the prose to kind of give this feeling of when my mom's not speaking to me, she's still very much on my mind, and that in that absence, she feels even more present. So that's just one of the formal techniques I use. So with that, I'll begin. Write the truth, my mom tells me. Otherwise, it wouldn't be honest or interesting. Okay. The second or third day, maybe. I forget words. I hold a string with pieces of metal attached to it. The pieces are shaped like cats. I dangle it in front of Chris. I pause. I know I sound like an idiot, I continue, but the name of it, you know. Wind chime, Chris says. Did my mom give this to us the Easter she wasn't talking to us? Chris can't remember, but he also can't remember if she talked to us the past 2 Easters. My mom silences, a few days here, almost 6 months there, over the 5 years since she moved in with Chris and me, amount to 1.5 years at least. A year ago, I told her, when you don't talk to me, it's all I can think about. I feel sick constantly. Next time I do it, she said, yell at me. Tell me to go to hell. I can't do that, I said. Sure you can. I'm not telling you to go to hell. Why not? Because, I don't know, just don't do it again. But she did it again. Then she did it again. And now, I think, again. I write start to-do list and immediately cross it off. Emails, checklists, those I can do. But any writing beyond that, about her silence, Mom, if I didn't want you to write about it, I shouldn't have done it. And during her silence, Mom, you don't need my permission. Enduring her silence, what I'm attempting here, to turn a painful distraction from writing into writing. I'm not so delusional that I fail to register another impulse, to make writing its own distraction, one that prevents me from feeling my pain. And here's something else I already did. Start a silent treatment. But how many times have I done that? Mom, it's a good title. What if you walk down there, Chris asks. We're sitting at the dining room table with our coffees and wind chime. He's wearing a gray shirt and boxers. The boxers are patterned with bacon and eggs, even though he's a vegetarian like me. They arrived as part of some underwear subscription service. Last month was unicorns. Behind him, outside 3 narrow windows, is my mom's private stairwell. It connects her basement apartment to our shared deck. Behind me, in our dining room's far corner, is a door, probably locked. On the other side is her second set of stairs. During a silence, she climbs those only to deliver letters or holiday gifts while Chris and I sleep. Mom, you are such a disappointment to me. Until I can leave here, leave me alone. I want no further contact. One Christmas, she cracked open the dining room door and tossed up my card. It flew into the room like a magic trick and landed on the hardwood floor. Or we could pretend this isn't happening, I tell him. That's what I did last time, and she stopped doing it after a couple weeks. But she can go months, he says, and stands. What are you doing? Closing the drapes? But she might think that means something, I say. Why don't I try to talk to her, he says. No, I tell him, I should do it. She's my mother. Mother sounds cold. Its coldness feels right. She's being cold. But my, attached to mother or mom, suddenly sounds strange. Maybe the possessiveness bothers me. What else do I call her? Barb sounds like what it is, a sharp projection near the tip of an arrow or hook, angled away from the main point to make extraction hard. Barb can also be a hurtful or disparaging remark. Barbara? When a childhood friend addressed her mother by name, I was shocked. I still began my letters to Santa, Dear Mr. Claus. I expected my friend to be sent underground. In kindergarten, I announced I was grounding myself for what, I forget, and went to the basement. To you, her mother snapped, I'm Mom. It sounded like a barb. Mom, a book needs conflict. Go to hell, I tell the wind chime. To hell with you. Why don't you go to hell? But what would happen if I said it to her? I'd cry. That's what I'd do, what I'm doing. I Google help me end the silent treatment and am instructed not to. I am not dealing with a normal person, these online strangers claim. But if a peer-reviewed psychology study reports that 67% of Americans have inflicted silence, that means 67% of Americans are not normal. Well, duration though. The study didn't specify duration. Until she moved to Baltimore, we spoke on the phone almost every day. Most calls lasted an hour. She usually waited for me to call her. When she called first, she asked, Am I interrupting? Our calls began shortly after I left Sandusky, Ohio at 18 for a university near Chicago. My dad died a month later. After that, she increasingly talked about how miserable she was. She hated her job. You know, I'd make more at McDonald's than I make at the library. She hated her house. I wish it burned down when the animals and I aren't home, or I wish the city would buy it off me and turn it into a parking lot. She missed my dad. What I wouldn't give to have him back. She missed me. I wish I could live near you. I hate this stinking town. I'm so proud of you for getting out. I was never brave enough or smart enough. Even our letters referenced our phone calls. Dear Mom, not much has happened in the 4 hours since I hung up with you. Jeannie, sorry about crying on the phone Sunday night. I recently found the letters, hers to me, inside a wood box underneath my office daybed, and mine to her inside folders of official documents that she'd asked me to store, and felt relieved. They confirmed that we did get along. After college, I moved to New York, and for about a decade lived in a series of rent-stabilized apartments. My mom loved to visit. She'd never ridden a plane before. I wish I could move to New York, she said. It's never boring. She reminded me that if it ever became too expensive, I could move back home. You wouldn't have to worry about rent or groceries, she said. You could have all day to write. She stopped mentioning this after Chris and I started dating, but I knew the offer was still there. After he and I moved to Baltimore for my teaching job, we rented a row house that cost the same as our New York shotgun apartment. Now we can live in the same city, I said to her, if you still want to do that. Baltimore is so much more affordable than New York. Then she said what she often said, I just want to be close to you. Maybe she didn't hear me call down yesterday morning and evening. She's deaf in her left ear. Her dad blew smoke in it when she was a girl, thinking that'd cure her ear infections. If she can't see who's speaking or what's making noise, she has trouble determining where the sound is coming from or registering a sound at all. I turn off the air purifier. Too loud, allege online reviews. Kneel, pluck some cat hair off the area rug, and press my ear against the dining room floor. A contractor installed insulation to muffle the noise between the first floor and the basement, which, in 2 months, he transformed from a dingy, unfinished space into a bright apartment. My mom says the insulation works, but when Chris and I are in our dining room, we can hear if she's in her living room, watching TV, talking on the phone, or playing fetch with her dog, Max. Is that packing tape? Paper crumpling? I should know the sound of paper crumpling. Mom, you're the writer. You decide what to include. Maybe the my of my mother sounds strange because she seems strange. I doubted my mom would use the silent treatment again. Mom, I won't do it again. Signs she's avoiding or preparing to avoid me. I open the door off my dining room, call down, Mom? And she doesn't answer, even though I heard her moving around moments ago. I shout, Mom? Again, and she still doesn't reply. She texts 2-letter replies, such as, okay and no. She locks the door off the dining room. She takes out her trash before sunrise. She sits hunched on the front steps, not the steps to our porch, but the steps closest to the sidewalk. Our front lawn is on a small hill, staring off. She stops feeding the squirrels and birds. She keeps her lights off. She keeps her phone off. She stacks cardboard boxes in the laundry room or garage or on the deck. Sometimes she includes a moving checklist with the names of retirement communities hundreds of miles away in Ohio. She writes letters. Her cruelest claims, we never did get along. Her softest reads, I love you, but I think we do better at a distance. She never did this to me when I was a child, not that I recall. She did it to my dad, though. They used the silent treatment on each other, she explained, because they didn't want to say something they'd regret. What does she want to say now that she'd regret? If I focus on one object, one without any sentimental associations, that might calm me. The radiator, let's start there. But is it radiator or radiator? I remember the realtor and the contractor pronouncing it rad and not ray. Or did they call it a radiator? Must be regional. As a child, I corrected my mom when she said wash instead of wash. I washed all your clothes, and do you need anything washed? I still feel horrible about that. She also told me, I could have gone to Washington, D.C. after high school. I was a good typist. I had an offer to be a secretary, but my dad wouldn't let me. He said I'd get raped there. He said I had to get married or he was kicking me out of the house. I sit at the dining room table and call her phone. It rings and rings below me. Frank Sinatra croons, New York, New York. I should have lied. It's impossible to make an entire song your ringtone. When we're together and she chooses not to answer, I sometimes remind her, to make it stop, you press this button. But when strangers glare, I want to tell them, she and my dad went dancing every Friday before I was born. When he, a longtime New Yorker, walked into the room, the DJ would play this song. Even though he died 20 years ago, I tell my dad, I'm trying, I really am, but you know how she can be. I remember him attempting to break her silences. Once he followed her to the basement and I heard something smash. Mom. He kept talking and talking. He wouldn't let it go. You wanted to transfer out of Catholic school, and I said absolutely not. So I threw the hot iron against the wall. I just wanted you to have a good education. I touched the doorknob the way one does in a fire and quietly test the lock. The knob turns. I open the door slightly and peer down her stairwell. The lights are off. Mom, I want to say, but I'm afraid to speak. And then I'm just going to skip ahead and read a very short passage. So, my mom gave me permission. It's like there in the prologue. My mom had said, I think you should write about it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be honest or interesting. And book needs conflict and all these things. But, she could say that. But I didn't want a silent treatment part 2. So I was like, I need to test this a little bit. And someone from the New York Times had asked if I had any ideas for a short essay for the magazine. And I thought, well, maybe I could, this could be the test. I'll check with her and see if she's okay with me writing about it with the New York Times. She's like, yeah, I think it's interesting. It's like, okay. So here's a short description of that. Months ago, I published an essay about her silent treatment. I asked her many times to read the essay before it moved too far along in the editorial process. If you want to read it, I said, and don't want me to publish it, I won't. I want to be surprised, she told me. But it's about your silent treatment, I said. I think you should write about it, she said. And anyway, it's the truth. After the essay reached layout, she spoke to a fact checker. She told me, I said to the fact checker, whatever my daughter wrote is the truth. After the essay was published, she said, seeing it in print, I realized it was kind of stupid what I did. Some negative comments arrived. Their general critique, how dare I write about her silent treatment, and why didn't I help her get involved in the community? I told her about these comments. Tell them that you did try to help me, she said. It's better not to engage, I said. But they've got it all wrong, she said. Secretly, I felt pleased. She felt protective of me. This allowed her to embrace the role of a mother. And I'll stop there. So thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Jeannie. That was just such a pleasure. Thank you. So now we have a little time when you all can ask questions or maybe make a comment even. And I'm going to repeat questions so that our online audience can hear. So if you want to, would anyone like to get us started? Just raise your hand if you have anything. Or maybe I can ask something just to break the ice. I didn't know if either. As I was reading both of your books, I was thinking about common threads, and I felt that there's a thread of anxiety that runs through your writing, and I didn't know if maybe you would like to talk about the relationship between creativity and anxiety. It's kind of a big subject. I mean, maybe not just in your life, but how can we make poems or art out of anxiety?
Sure, I'm happy to.
Oh, and the mix, if you want to grab.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. Does this works now? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question and an interesting thread. And I do think that for me, my poems never come out of something that I'm sure of. They always come out of some kind of uncertainty or thing that I'm worrying over or feel of two minds about. And so that is maybe not always the exact same thing as the state of anxiety, but that common ground there between what it takes to feel okay, this is something I want to be working through in writing, and that just more regular life anxiety. I do think there's common ground there.
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yeah, I leaned into, if anyone's read the book, I leaned into the anxiety element of it. There was a humorous, it was the most painful experience of my life. One of the most painful experiences of my life. I mean, I think the most previous one would have been like losing my dad, but then having my mom choose not to speak to me, it was just, yeah, I don't, who here has received the silent treatment? Have people, yeah, okay. I mean, it's pretty common. There was something though about like living with my mom and knowing it was happening, and I thought, so this is like on a more concrete level, like getting at your question, that relationship between creativity and anxiety, if I let the anxiety, if I thought about it too much, it would get stuck. So I thought, how can I channel this into the writing? And it turns out anxiety can be like very funny for having a narrator who's constantly obsessing over things. And like I became obsessed with, there's these eggs that come with newsletters. I don't know when eggs started coming with newsletters. They're really like, I don't know, fancy eggs, but they had henkus, like haikus about hens. And I was just like found so much around me really fascinating, but became obsessed with that. And then like the question of, do I get bangs or do not get bangs? And I just found that the anxiety, if I could channel it into the writing rather than let it overtake me during the writing process, that was very productive for me. I don't know if that quite answers your question. But I think there's definitely a relationship for me. I have to feel like there's some conflict that I'm working against in order to generate material.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? On the end? Thank you.
So this is for Jeannie. In your book, you have this sort of conflict between control and the idea of writing the narrative as controlling the story versus the anxiety of you being nervous of like presenting your mother in a different way or not seeing her side of the story or not being, which kind of causes that like almost writer or some writer's block. So I guess my question is, since the book's come out, and I don't know if your mom had a chance to read it, but like has that changed like how you felt about the control versus sort of that almost putting yourself into trying to make up to her, or trying to like, I don't know, just be like effacing or like be like, well, I need to balance it. Like, have you sort of recontextualized like control versus being sort of more self-effacing with that, or is the problem location?
That's such a good question. So my mom has been in the best mood since this book came out, which obviously I'm very happy about, but she wanted to wait to read it. She said, I'll wait to read it until everybody else does. And I was like, okay, maybe though, like you could read it because like once it's published, it's kind of made public and it's permanent. She's like, well, then what am I going to do? Like if I read it and tell you to remove something, or then it's no longer your book. This is your version of events. And if I didn't want you to write about it, I shouldn't have done it. But I felt very uncomfortable with that because I don't want loved ones to feel like they're always on the record with me just because I write memoir. I feel a little bit bad about that. But she has not read it yet. We decided that she'll read it after I've like done like these events and interviews. It just makes these a little bit easier. But she's gone to events and she's just been so supportive. And yeah, so, and it got me thinking, I know a lot of people feel anxiety writing about loved ones. And I had so much anxiety writing about someone who I love very much, and I didn't want to hurt her. But I realized that in writing memoir, I mean, my mom, she's like, nobody is perfect. Nobody's a perfect parent, Jeannie. Like, that wouldn't be interesting. You need something else. You need conflict. And I realized, like, I think it's a greater demonstration of love, or this is what I'm now telling myself to feel better about it, but that to write about someone as we see them and not to idealize them, because that's also like what got my mom and I into this conflict. My mom would idealize me, and for a while I'd be the perfect daughter, and then suddenly I don't know what would happen. I wouldn't know what I had done wrong. And so I think there is a danger in idealizing people because we can never live up to those expectations. And so while the triggering subject of the book. By triggering, I mean, I'm thinking of like the poet Richard Hugo, his essay Triggering Talent, but like the starting subject is the silent treatment. But really what I think the true subject is the unrealistic expectations that parents and children put on each other. So I feel my mom, someone may say like, that sounds a little codependent, Jeannie, but I'm like, well, my mom's happy, I'm happy. So she's happy about it. Then it's a success in my world. But I'm getting a lot of feedback from people saying that it's a compassionate portrayal. So I hope my mom sees it that way. But I think I just had to get through the writing process and hold myself. I think in memoir writing, it's also an issue of like you want to hold yourself as accountable, if not more accountable, than you hold the other people you're writing about. Does that answer the question? Okay.
Good.
Yeah, this is really for both of you. Dora, in your several collections, and Jeannie, in all three of your memoirs, there's such close attention to sound work. And I noticed in Dora's poems, even if the subject matter is ostensibly dark, it's both countered and complemented by this kind of often wonderfully kind of Boolean sound work, and they're really a pleasure to read. And Jeannie, hearing you read, I mean, everyone just heard it, there's a real lyricism in the prose itself. I'm curious to know, in the moment of composition, how much attention are you paying to story or content or theme, and how much attention are you paying to that very careful sound work that each of you do?
Well, I know for me, the pleasure of sound work and of working with like having language as a medium is why I go to writing in the first place. I want every poem and every line and every word to mean, I don't want it to be only that surface level or to be assumed to be that surface level. But for me, I mean, we're talking about anxiety and like things you're not sure about, and connections that are being made, and what's the subject and what is the real subject, and what Jeannie's talking about. I do think that like following and engaging with that materiality is a way to find that out and to have the act of writing be a process of discovery as opposed to a getting down of content. So that's just to say, I mean, for me, there is often like a push-pull in the revision process of, I don't want something to end up in there that I followed that was kind of a dead end, or like a flatness that I followed just for sound, but the sound is very much what gets me to the meaning.
Yeah, and I think it could be that I originally started out studying poetry, and I read poetry probably just as much, if not more, than I read memoir writing. And I find it's very generative in terms of, rather than thinking about, okay, this is the story, this is the narrative, this is the series of events, I find that letting sound take me, like the acoustics of a sentence, push me forward, that it helps loosen my mind to free associate and remain open to other possibilities. So I do think there's some element of like, to tell the truth in memoir, I think it's really helpful to study poetry, because sometimes people go into memoir writing with a sense of, this is the narrative, this is what I'm doing, and they're not, I'm speaking very generally, but they're not letting them, to me, thinking is the plot. And the way I think a lot of times is through the acoustics, through the sounds, letting that guide me. So yeah, it's really crucial. Sound is really crucial for me, and I just find that a lot of my favorite writers are also paying attention to, the kind of stress-heavy sentences. I think in prose of like Christine Scutt, for example, yeah.
And I'll just say, Jeannie, about your work, I actually wasn't thinking about sound and the relationship to poetry in your work, but I was thinking a lot about like your sort of well-chosen figures, like that touching the doorknob as if, as if in a fire. And I was like, that to me was so evocative and very much like in keeping with, a kind of like poetic spirit. So it's cool to see all of those kind of techniques in your work.
Other questions? I keep forgetting to repeat the question, so I'm gonna repeat this question. Go ahead.
Since you guys kind of write about like very personal things,
Okay, and this is a question about balancing the vulnerability of your private life with, what's the second word used? With balancing privacy and telling the truth, or yeah, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps I'm not on any social media. So I think that's, I think I need that for myself, because if I were able to see, like, well, first of all, is anyone reading it? Is anyone's having anything to say about it, or what are people, or just being aware of that there is a wider audience. I mean, intellectually I know, but then I don't have to go into that place. I think it helps me be more vulnerable, and I just assume a lot of people aren't gonna, I mean, this is a different crowd, but most people aren't gonna read it. I just don't, I don't assume it's gonna have a big readership. I try to keep my expectations reasonable. And I think that helps. When I'm writing, it's not that I'm not thinking about a reader. For this, what made it so difficult was my mom. I'm thinking about her as the reader. But I think to maintain that vulnerability, I'm really talking to myself on the page and thinking about, just thinking through the process and the ethics of what it is I'm doing. And to me, the most vulnerable aspect of memoir isn't the story, isn't how dramatic the story is. The intimacy to me comes from observing how someone's mind is working. And I think we're kind of seeing that. I'm a big fan. I love essays. And I think there's been this, I didn't come up with this, but there, smarter scholar people have commented on the essayification of memoir, where it's less like 3x structure or double timeline, but more thinking through something. And to me, that's where the vulnerability is how is somebody making meaning out of an experience rather than how is someone reconstructing just the events. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have to say that this is like a very potent question for me, because I'm not writing memoir. In a way, it's a strange thing, because there are so many like technical overlaps, and we're probably reading some of the same. But like at the end of the day, Jeannie is saying like, this is the truth. I'm telling the truth. I'm like telling my own story. And for poetry, it really is, I think, much more slippery than that. And listening to this it makes me feel, in a funny way, like childish, because I'm like, why don't I just say this is true? But there's this distancing that I actually think is not just childish, or it is childish in the sense that there's a play there, like you're playing, and calling it a poem and leaning into the poem lets you both like tell the truth and also have these like flights of fancy, which can tell a different kind of truth and like bring in things from different timelines. And there was a lag, to give like a concrete example, there was a lag time in publishing for this book because there was a lag time in publishing, and that's just publishing. But there also was for me because I just sat on it for like 2 years, because I got kind of paralyzed by like, what in this is true and what is not. And I had to really like think it through. And part of it was the chronology that I had this book, and I had 2 kids and multiple miscarriages, and the timeline in what I was telling didn't all add up. And I kind of had to get over, and I was like, well, but people are going to get confused. They're going to like be like, wait, you had a kid and then you didn't have a kid, and then what's happened, and I really had to basically come to terms with like, this is poetry. I can take these poems, I can put them together how I want to. I have agency here. People are not going to call me out on it in this way. And so I had to basically like get enough distance from that. And I'll say one more thing. I really don't like the sort of the mythology of like, you have to be tortured, or you have to be anxious, or you have to be miserable to write. But just to speak to like that potency of your question, I get very up before reading and while reading, and after a reading, I crash completely, because it is embarrassing. At the end of the day, I'm like, oh my God, it's like I start my book with this idea of like a dream and kind of being put on the spot. And there is that thing where you're like, I'm doing that. I'm like sharing this with like both people I know and people I don't know. What a bizarre thing to do. And yet there is something about the act of writing and then the sharing of it that is also like very consoling and and nourishing. So I think there's no perfect answer, but it is a very good question and very much, I think, at the heart of like making art and particularly making art out of language.
It's fascinating. Let's see, how are we for time? Well, one last question, or if not, would you perhaps each like to say what you're reading now, or recommend something to all of us as we close?
Well, so I'm going to cheat on that a tiny bit, but it's not really, it's not cheating. So two things, and they're cheating because they're both plugs for things. One is, so there are people in this room who work on and publish in the Hopkins Review. And so I feel really lucky that what I'm reading at any given time is just so much contemporary writing, some of it published, some of it unpublished, some of it like in copy editing. And so that is really exciting, and just a plug for like, lit mags. If you read lit mags, you're always reading a million different things at once. And then the other thing I will say I'm reading, and that actually has a piece in it that first came out in the Hopkins Review, is Elise Levine's new book of stories. And we're going to read together at Bird in Hand next week in conversation with Nate Brown, who's here. So very much like a community affair like this. But yeah, one of the great things about working on the Hopkins Review is I've read a lot more fiction, a lot more, many more essays and nonfiction, and short stories in particular, when we're talking about like where genres meet, I think is a really interesting one for a poet to be reading short stories and kind of thinking about that. So that's what I'm reading.
Yeah, I'm always reading so many things at once, including literary magazines, including, oh my God, is it the most recent issue of the Hopkins Review where it lands on that Berryman poem? Yeah. Oh my God, yeah, the latest issue of the Hopkins Review, just incredible. Get a hold of it. So I'm often reading literary magazines like Brick, like Hopkins Review, Bomb, McSweeney's, Believer. I could go on. But two memoirs that I recently read, just because I'm doing events with them, and it's they're both wonderful. Amanda Ule's "Destroy This House," and Sarah Labree's "No One Gets to Fall Apart." I would say those are the two memoirs most recently on my mind. But I'm a big rereader. I don't know if other people here are this way. Like, to the point, there's this book I've read, like more than Mary Robison's Why Did I Ever? I don't know if anyone, like, I've read that easily more than 30 times. And I once was outside a therapist's office. He's like, oh, what's this book? I was like, oh, it's so good. I've read it at least like 30 or 40 times. And he had this concerned look like, oh no, like maybe I don't want this patient. But it's a quick read. But I'm such a big rereader, so I'm often reaching back and looking at through my shelves.
And I love that. Okay, Cleve, we don't have any other questions online. Okay, well, I think that's a great place to end. So I want to thank all of you also in the audience who asked those excellent questions that I think showed that this is a really interesting pairing, and I would love to hear the two of you talk more someday. Thank you, Dora and Jeannie, so much for your comments and also for your gorgeous readings. I want to thank our sign language interpreter who came to us through Gateway for her wonderful performance also. And And I want to thank Snug Books for selling books right outside this room. Everyone, please purchase copies of Dora's and Jeannie's books. They're so good. You will be glad that you had them at home where you can enjoy them further. And please take a look at the flyers in the back and sign up for the poetry email event list if you're interested. Thanks for joining us today. Please enjoy the rest of your weekend.